Now today is going to be easier than yesterday. And most of you will probably think it's more fun. But yesterday we did all the heavy lifting. That was the theory day. That was the how it works and kind of the fundamentals of reality. And I make everybody sit through that before we talk about what's it like to get into the larger reality and how we go about doing that, and some of the pitfalls and limitations. And the reason I do is that in this reality, of course, most of us really don't care about the why and how that things happen. We only deal with what happens. When we get in our car, most of us really don't care how that engine works and what all those wires and hoses do and that sort of thing. It's like, that's all right, just as long as it works. If I step on the pedal in it and it goes, and I step on the brake and it stops, that's all I need to know about my car. And that's fine in the physical reality, because you can always take that car to a mechanic when something goes wrong with it. As long as somebody knows what's going on in there and can fix it, that's fine. Well, here, I'd like to give you the how it works and what's going on under the hood, because there is no mechanic to fix it for you. This is a personal exploration. And if you don't understand it, then it's going to affect what you can do with it. Okay, so that's why we do the theory first of how and why it works. But we're not going to do theory now. We're going to talk about application. So you'll hear a lot of what we talked about yesterday coming back up, because when you talk about application of the theory, of course, you still talk some about the theory. But this will be a little lighter day. Another one of Judy's lovely diagrams. I think that's me in the picture. Okay. Flip it. All right, the first question that I often get from people is, okay, you've worked with Bob Monroe for 5 or 6 or 7 years, almost a decade, and you had all these experiences before that and so on, so you're kind of special, right? Can anybody do it, or is it only special people are really kind of inclined to do this? And the answer to that is anybody can do this. Everybody that has consciousness can learn to explore consciousness. It's all it takes. You're already there. You are consciousness. Okay? It's like you don't have to get out of body. Your consciousness already is out of body. Consciousness is a non-physical thing. So yes, you can do this. Okay, but now, of course, you see that second bullet. It says yes. Theoretically, well, what that theoretically means, not that some of you are ill-fitted for it, it means that it takes practice, it takes an interest, it takes some stamina. This is not something that you do casually. This is a lifetime pursuit. I've been doing this for now about 38 years. So it takes a lot of time to get rid of the things that block it. Okay, so anybody can learn to play a piano, but very few of us actually do. Any of us can learn to probably sing on key, but very few of us do. The last bullet's important. So many of you would like to become operational in the non-physical. That's a big attractor to a lot of people. Oh yeah, I want to do those things. I want to be able to go out of body, and I want to be able to look at the future probable realities and explore the past and do all these neat things. So is that important? The answer is no, that's not really important. The point of what we're here for is to grow, to increase the quality of our consciousness. You can do that without ever doing anything paranormal. That's not a necessary step. Now, as you grow and reduce the entropy of your consciousness, these paranormal things become more and more available to you. They become easier and easier to do. They're just a natural part of consciousness. But it's not, don't have the idea that by going out of body, It will improve the quality of your consciousness. That's not it. You can go out of body and not improve the quality of your consciousness at all. So you have to stay focused on what's important. What's important is reducing the entropy of your consciousness. All this other stuff, and we're going to talk about a lot of this other stuff today, is just things that come natural to a low entropy consciousness. Things you can do, places you can explore, but they're not necessary. They're not critical. And in the big picture, they're not really all that important. So don't feel like that you're not getting there. You're failing in the evolution game if you can't or don't do these things. That would not be a good assumption. That's not the way it is. Okay, well, if everybody can do it, how? The first thing that I tell people to do is learn to meditate. Now, there are literally hundreds of different ways to meditate. And again, meditation is just a tool. There's nothing sacred about meditation. Meditation is a tool. Eventually, after you've meditated a long time and can get to those states easily, you let meditation go. Meditation isn't something you have to do. It's a tool to get basically a beginner up to a point where they're familiar with their own consciousness. That's the point of meditation. So if you want to start examining consciousness, the place to start that examination is with your own. And the way to examine your own consciousness is to learn to meditate, to just be conscious. And that's really what meditation is. And I have a long aside in chapter 23 in book 1 that talks about how to meditate. Okay? And like I say, there's so many ways to meditate. You don't have to follow those instructions to meditate. And just like all other tool sets, people sometimes make the tools sacred, and then they want to fight with each other about, which tools are the best. So there will be some that say, well, if you say the mantra, which is just a sound, and I'll tell you in a minute how that works, that's not really a good way to do it. What you need to do is concentrate on your breathing. That's the real way to do it. And then you get into a lot of that. Different schools and different peoples, and they'll have these tools that they use, and the tools become kind of the way. Avoid all that. You need to find a meditation that works for you, something that you do. And it may not have anything to do with your breath or mantras, either one. It's just whatever works for you. And eventually, like I say, you'll let that tool go too. Okay, so another thing to tell you is that there are no shortcuts to this process. This is a process you have to develop out of your own experience. Now, there are very shallow shortcuts. Yes, you can take the magic mushroom, you can take some drug of one sort or another, and it will blast you into other realities. But that's not valuable experience. If you can't get there under your own energy in your own way, you're not going to learn anything from that. That's not valuable. That would be like an illiterate is given a tour through a library, a 15-minute tour through the library, and then he exits out the other door. And what has he learned? He's learned that there's a lot of things out there. Wow, a lot of information, but he doesn't know how to read. So it just doesn't help in the long term. So aids, and those aids I would also include besides drugs that are useless. It's also the training. You can get somebody who can train you, who can give you exercises and keep working with you and get you to where you can do these things. But then you're just doing them. You don't necessarily have an ability to understand what you're doing, what it means, interpret it, and use it as a tool for growth, for your own personal growth. So don't rush to the paranormal. It's an attractive thing to get involved in, but it also can be an attractive hazard. Many people get to where they can experience some of the paranormal. They can look into the probable realities. They see auras and they do things, and that gets them stuck. Because at that point, they get their ego wrapped up in that ability to do that. They practice it and can get good at it. You can get good at things like that just practicing them, but they no longer become doorways to something better, to improving yourself. They become ends in themselves, and then it's a trap. That's as far as you will progress. So the point of this isn't to become a wizard or a wizardess. The point is to grow, learn, evolve. Okay? Not only are drugs and things like that not helpful, they're usually counterproductive. If you get to your altered states through drugs, it makes it less likely that you'll be able to get to your altered states without drugs. So it actually, you dig yourself a hole if you go that route. It's not a productive thing. Those who will tell you that the drugs were productive for them are probably the ones who tried it once. It opened their eyes to, my God, look at all this reality. And after that, they let it alone and they pursued a learning path. So I won't tell you that drugs have never been productive for anybody's growth, but just that the use of drugs in order to get altered states is not a productive process. Okay, now the approach to meditation. Notice the things that are in highlight there with orange. They're all about things not to do. It's all about fear nothing, hope for nothing, no thinking, no analysis, expect nothing, eliminate beliefs, don't compare, don't judge. You see? So the way you meditate is to not do things that are normal for you to do every day. So that's the key to it, is to stop doing these things that block it. Now, when I say no intellect, that the intellect is a problem, and I'm going to mention that a little later, I'm not saying that you can't think and that when you're in these altered states, you're just mindless and floating free. You can do that, but that's not necessary either. What I'm saying when I say that we don't want your intellect involved, and I said that when we were doing that healing and diagnosing, I said, get your intellect out of the way. Well, it's not that you can't think, it's that you can't direct your activity. Yes, use your intellect to direct your activity, otherwise you'll be directionless. But what you shouldn't do with your intellect is analyze, judge, decide that what's right, try to guess. Using your intellect as a operative analytical tool, that's what's going to get you into trouble. Just experience, direct your experience with your intellect, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, that's fine. But don't judge it. There will be times for judging your experience later. Don't judge your experience until you have enough experience to be judged. Okay, so you can learn to, let's say, go talk to a what we would call a non-physical being. Again, non-physical just means that they don't share this reality with us. Everything else is non-physical. If you can talk to other entities who are not in this reality, but if you do that for a week or a month, you won't have any idea whether you're making it up or whether you're actually talking to something that's outside of you. And if at that point you throw up your hands and say, gee, I don't know, is this real? You will have quit too soon. You need to work this until you have enough data to make a decision of what's outside of you and what's inside of you. Because it's all the same to consciousness. Consciousness is just data. You can make up the data or you can get the data from outside, but it's data and you interpret that data, and there's no real way for you to know whether you're making it up or whether it's outside of you, except through experience. In other words, you have to collect that data maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, without making judgment to where it's coming from. And then you make judgments about the value of the data, not judgments while you're engaged in conversation, but judgments afterwards. Say, well, okay, I've been doing this now for 6 months, and what have I gotten out of it? Is it just a bunch of useless small talk? That's probably you talking to yourself. Or is it just the things that I already know? It's probably you talking to yourself. But if you're getting information that is foreign to you, that you don't know, If you're getting data and you're getting facts and you're getting other things that you corroborate later, then that's not you. You will get a sense for that. It's not all intellectual. You will get an intuitive sense for the reality of the data, and the more experience you have with it, the stronger that intuitive sense will become. So eventually you will know. Now, if you're talking with an entity and you've been doing this for a year and you still don't have any idea, I would say let it go. Try another methodology. Try to find someone else to talk to. It's probably not being useful. And that could be two reasons. It could be because you're talking to yourself, or it could be because that entity just doesn't really have a lot to offer you. They don't know a whole lot. Just because those entities don't live here and aren't trapped with our vision doesn't mean they aren't trapped in the vision of the virtual reality that they're in. Okay, so just leaving here doesn't make you wise. Some of us have that idea that, oh, here we're trapped and, this is the dumb place, right? The elementary school. But then after we pass over to the other side, suddenly everything will be clear to us and we'll have all the secrets and we'll know everything. You don't grow up. You don't reduce the entropy of your consciousness by dying. So those entities that are there, they're also in virtual realities, and they're also limited by their experience. They also have to interpret everything that they get because they're just getting data too. So it's not a guarantee that the entities you talk with are going to be able to be particularly helpful to you. So that's the approach to meditation is probably more important than the meditation itself. Meditation is just a tool. Now, the tool that I talk about is using a mantra because that's easy. And I'll tell you how that works. The mantra is just a sound to fill up your mind with something useless that you cannot operate on. That's the ingredient. So you make up a mantra, and it should be some kind of sound with an ing, ring, ding-a-ling kind of sound in it, because that's a kind of a resonant sound. So, you can make a sound like sharing, not sharing, not shearing, nothing that you don't want anything that's a sound that has to do with a word that you know, because then suddenly you're connecting it to something physical here. So it just needs to be a sound. And you just say it in your mind. And the reason you keep saying it, you just repeat that sound and just listen to it in your mind. I mean, repeat it, not out loud, not acoustically, but just in your mind. And you let that sound be there. So there's nothing in your mind but that sound. All we're doing is filling your head with nonsense so that you'll stop thinking, judging, analyzing. Am I doing this? Am I doing it right yet? Let's see, how does this feel? That chatter goes on all the time in your mind. That's what we're trying to get rid of. What you want to do is just exist as consciousness. The end point of this meditation is what I call point consciousness in the void. And all that amounts to is that you're able to let go of all the chatter inside your head that's going on all the time. We're always thinking, analyzing, judging. And we need to stop that. And when you stop that, there's nothing else in there except you. And that's scary for some people when they actually run into themselves in a meditation state. And they feel very disoriented. And sometimes they're afraid they're going to lose themselves. They're losing their identity because that chatter is their identity. And that can be a terrifying experience for some people. And often people who just can't meditate, it's a fear barrier. Okay, so that's what meditation is. And whether you get that filling your mind with something that keeps you from thinking, whether that's because you're paying attention to your breath, because you're saying a mantra, because then you're looking and tracing the lines of a mandala, because you're looking at a candle flame, it doesn't matter. Because you're listening to music, all those are ways of meditation. Okay, so meditation's just a tool to prevent you from analyzing all the time. Okay, now, some of the typical experiences that you may want to have, you may want to experience. Of course, there's out of body, and I told you that I prefer to call that out of mind, but I don't for obvious reasons. Don't worry about your body. If you're interested in this, it has nothing to do with your body. Your mind, your consciousness is already out of your body. All you have to do is connect with that consciousness. Lucid dreams, night dreams, daydreams, all just alternate reality systems, all just as real as this system. Precognitive dreams, getting into the probable realities, remote viewing, that's just getting into the historical database. Healing yourself, others. Yes, it works on yourself as well as on others. It also works on your pets. It's just you using your intent of your consciousness to modify where there is uncertainty. Where uncertainty exists, you can make modifications. How it comes out, how that probable future will actually work out, you can raise or lower those probabilities with your mind. It hasn't happened yet. Measurement hasn't been done. Nobody's measured where that photon is yet. So you can adjust where it is with your mind. Okay. You can visit other reality frames. And I call the PMR, the physical frames, are those frames that have a very constrained rule set that make them more physical, and those with less constrained is what we call non-physical. But those are just terms that we use. And those are just metaphors. There is no physical and non-physical. You can communicate with beings that are in other reality frames. You can, when you go to these other reality frames, you can exist as just awareness, as an observer, or you can join them, manifest a body, and walk among them if you like. Be part of what's going on there. Interact. Those are your choices. You can learn to do those. It's just a matter of focusing your intent. Again, it's all just data. So it's not that you have to create this massive body and that takes huge amount of energy because, E equals mc squared and all this body mass and lots of it. It's not like that. That's physical thinking. It's just data. You just insert yourself as data into their data stream, and then you exist there with them. So it's easier than it sounds. Okay, a low entropy consciousness has access to all of that, but again, none of it's necessary. Okay. Now, the primary constraints. What keeps you from doing this? Fear, belief, and inexperience. What you will find in these other reality frames is going to be very strongly influenced by you, because you have to do the interpretation. The data you get is objective, but the interpretation is subjective. Okay. The big mistake that most people make when they get into these realities is that they don't understand that they are subjectively interpreting the information. What they see and hear and smell and touch there seems vaguely familiar. I mean, it's kind of like the things that are here. They project a kind of funky version of physical reality onto the non-physical because of their interpretation. So when they go into a non-physical place, they find buildings, they find parks, they find recreation areas, a place to go sit down and listen to music. They find all kinds of things that are very PMR-like. Well, that's because that's how they interpret those things. Not that those things objectively exist. That's their subjective interpretation. There is an objective data that they're running into, but that's their interpretation. So don't think of what you experience in terms of the way you interpret it. Try to read between the lines, not just the lines. In other words, don't take it literally. Look at it at a deeper level than just the literal experience. Another thing to tell you is that the more experience you have, the more capable you are of interpreting that data correctly. You stop interpreting it all in terms of just the physical reality, because the physical reality is the only thing you know. Once your knowledge gets to spread wider, your interpretation spreads wider with it. Your interpretation is based on what's in your experience, what's in your own private database. That's how you interpret. As that private database grows and expands, your interpretations grow and expand as well. So part of what limits you is your own experience. Now, that sounds like a catch-22, right? You can't interpret it right because you don't have the experience. You don't have the experience because you can't interpret it right. But the way you pull yourself up by your bootstraps is just persistence. You just go, you learn a little bit, you find things out, and you do experiments. You have to always do experiments. Don't just experience and accept and believe. You experience and find a way to verify and validate that experience, that experience is outside of you, that it's what you experience. Try to find the point of it, the reason, the lesson. What is that experience good for? Look at the value in it, not just as experience for experience sakes, but look for the why behind the experience. These things then will lead you to a much better understanding of what you actually are experiencing. Your database will grow. Your ability to interpret will get more accurate. Okay, now when you communicate in the non-physical, you communicate telepathically. Telepathically means you don't get words. It's not a linear letters making words and words making sentences. Now you can hear that sometimes. You can take the data you get and the message and you can hear sound. I've had voices give me very specific, English language messages, but that's the exception. Mostly that's not the way it works. That's a very specific situation. Mostly the way it works is you get a paragraph or maybe even a chapter. You get a download of a chunk of information with content. And that chunk of information is not about detail of place, stuff, position, things, because that's not the reality. And that's the way our information is here. Well, let's just take a little example, just this room. If we were to get data about this room telepathically, if we were to look at it conceptually, I guess that's the best way to say it. Telepathic data, you're getting concepts, you're getting content, you're not getting detail. Okay, so what would we say about this room? If we were looking at it in detail, what we do is say all the things that you could measure. Well, it has walls, and the walls are this big and this high, and have this material and this texture and this color, and it has a rug, and the rug looks like this, and there's a table and a lectern, and we basically go through and do an inventory of everything in this room, and we'd list everything in detail, the color, the texture, the material, and then that would be our objective room, right? Well, when you get this room telepathically, what you get is the ambience, the function. You kind of see it's a place where people are, and that those people are engaged in something, and they've come to this space for that engagement and for what they might learn. And you get a sense of whether it's a harsh place or a friendly place, warm or cold. That's the kind of thing that you would get. And that's all you get. You would not get the color of the rug, the material the table's made out of. All that stuff is irrelevant to the larger purpose, to what's going on, to the content. Well, what happens, of course, is that when somebody goes and they go out of body or they do this sort of thing, what the researcher wants to know is, tell me what was there. What they want is a list of all the stuff, because that's what we're used to here. That's proof. That's the evidence that you were there. If you can give them a list of all the stuff, describe the room, the wallpaper, what was on the floor, who was there, and what were they wearing, you see? And if you can't describe that, then, well, you weren't there. It's just in your imagination. Well, it doesn't work that way. The things that you're going to get that are when you communicate with telepathy is going to be conceptual. The ambience, the feeling, the function, the meaningfulness, why it's significant, why it's not significant. That's what you get. So don't expect just a funky version of physical reality when you go there. Don't expect anything. Just be aware and accept what comes. Okay. Because you're launching your exploration from this reality frame. Here's where we are. We're a part of our consciousness. We're projected in this reality frame. We're launching now a out-of-body experience or some other kind of paranormal experience from this reality frame. Because we're doing that, we're stuck with that interpretation of what we have here. Excuse me, sound guys. What we have here in this physical reality. Okay, we're stuck with that as the basis. That's kind of our root now, because here's where we are. We're projecting from here. It's different than if you are just consciousness in another reality system. Then you're kind of stuck with the root from that. So it depends on where you start from. Okay, we're starting from here, so we have to deal only with what we have here to deal with. That's why we're limited to our experience that we have here, and our knowledge and our metaphors and our understanding that we have here. It's not that you go up to the non-physical and suddenly, a whole different vocabulary and world and language and everything becomes available to you. You have to integrate it through this basis. Okay? You are your dictionary. So that is a very limiting thing, because you have ego, you have beliefs, you have lack of experience, and that's the filter you have to integrate this through. That's the filter you have to use to interpret it. So, of course, the most important thing then is to get rid of those things, that warp your interpretation. Now, if you're going to if you have an experience in the non-physical, you may come back with something that you can't put into words. It may just have been a feeling or something else that is more emotional than it is literal. But if you're going to explain it to somebody else, you have to use language. As soon as you use language, you are reduced to a process that was designed to describe physical matter reality. We don't have things in our language that describe anything other than physical reality, because that's how the language grew up. So you're stuck with that. So now you start to tell people, and you can't find the words, and you can't really express an emotion to anybody very accurately. Your emotions kind of defy words. Well, some of what you get is going to be like that. Okay, so let's talk about what you find when you get there. Okay, first we'll talk about the things that you influence. We've talked about some of this. It's your fears and beliefs that create a lot of what you see. And here's some examples. If you remember in Bob's books and in other people's writings about their out-of-body experience and thing, often they'll try to return and run into a wall. That was in one of Bob's books. He was on his way back, and here was a wall. Well, what is that wall? That wall is fear. It's the fear that you can't get back. So if you have that fear in your mind that maybe you won't be able to get back, that's your wall. You'll materialize that wall. Okay. Also, remember in one of Bob's books, he stuck his hand through a hole, and he got a hook in his hand. Something grabbed him, right? That was his fear. If he had no fear of that happening, that would not have happened. So you bring to your experience your fears and your beliefs. It's not that there's a place out there and it has walls and you got to be careful that you don't get behind one you can't get around, or that there's things out there waiting to hook your hand if you stick it through a hole. That's not true. Those are your fears. Some people will get out of body and immediately they get attacked by things. Things jump on them and pick at them. It's the demons get them. That's their fear. That's doing that. With the near-death experiences, but also with just the out-of-body, a lot of people report going through tunnels, flying, through a vortex, speed, this feeling of motion, and then suddenly being in a place. The reason they have that is because they believe you have to move in order to get someplace. That's just a belief we have here, because that's the way it is here. But we take that physical reality belief with us, and we can't get someplace up there unless we move, because that's just what we believe. So what do? We make a tunnel. We move through the tunnel. Well, okay, at the end of the tunnel, now we can be someplace different. Or we walk through a door, or we dive into a circle of light. There's all kinds of metaphors that we create to enable us to go someplace. None of that's necessary. Again, it's a tool. Now, it may be necessary if you have that belief and you can't go anywhere without that, then you need to make a circle of light and dive through it, because that's your tool, just like we use the tools for healing. Okay, so it's a tool of yours. But again, don't make the tools anything more than tools, and create the tools that work for you. A lot of people will report, the great white light being they run into. Okay, that's a metaphor. They have run into something very much greater than themselves, but that's their interpretation, that's their metaphor. Don't think of this as just another physical reality where there's these, these bright beings that just stroll around, and sometimes you run into them. It's not that way. And if any of you have read some of the older literature about out-of-body, you will remember that everybody was attached to their body with a silver cord. That was just the way it was. They all had silver cords. And they all looked at those silver cords and they reported those silver cords. Did you notice that now nobody has a silver cord? Silver cords are out of style. Well, that was a belief that the body was fundamental and that this out-of-body was secondary, was somehow a projection, you see, from the body. So you had to have a cord. If you didn't have a cord, then one, how would you get back? That was like dropping the breadcrumbs as you go, right? You have the cord. And so that was a fear. They needed an attachment to their body. But also, because they were secondary, this out-of-body thing was the secondary thing. This is the real reality. That was a kind of a subset reality, and you had to be connected to it. So you had a silver cord. And why did all the researchers and all the people going up all have silver cords? It's an expectation. If you read a book and the book tells you that you're connected with a silver cord, and then you get out of body, well, there's your silver cord. You have to have one too. Just like all those people trying to roll out of body. That's what Bob did, so they're trying to roll out of body. They're trying to do that same thing too. So Bob goes out and he sees something out there. He sees a park with a pond and a nice place to go fish, then other people go there too, fish in that same pond. You find all of those things that are in your expectation. Okay, but it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that's there. There is objective data out there, things to experience. But you have to understand that you are adding the perspective to them. And now, if you experience something similar, that doesn't mean that you're just copying somebody else. It means that you probably have a similar set of data to interpret. So you're getting maybe roughly the same data that somebody else got because you're interacting with kind of the same thing, and you interpret it the same way because you're all part of the same culture. You've heard of the very famous psychologist Jung. He talked about archetypes across cultures, and then archetypes across humanity. That there are certain ways and certain symbols and metaphors that we use that are common, across cultures and within cultures. Well, this is the same way. So if you're in the same culture as this other person doing this, you have a propensity to interpret a lot of it the same way, particularly if you have kind of similar experiences. You kind of all grew up in a similar kind of culture, and you did similar kind of things, and you went to public school, and then you went to college, and then you got a job, and there's a lot of similarity there. So you tend to see the same things. Well, we don't see, right? We don't have eyes when we're out of body. We don't have senses and nerves. We don't hear. We just get data and we interpret it. If we have the same or very similar databases, we interpret it very similar ways. Okay. So, another thing I sometimes mention is a favorite of many people is the Hindu philosophy, and energy is broken up into chakras there. Well, okay, that is a tool set that divides up the functionality of the energy that they see in, I think it's 7 different chakras that are various places, and they're related to the body. But see, again, it really doesn't have anything to do with the body. The body's just virtual. But why don't the Zen Buddhists have chakras? Why don't the American Indians have chakras? Well, they have their own things. The chakras aren't fundamental. They're a tool set. They're a way of defining things, just like that energy that we used yesterday to heal those black spots. You know, it's energy, and it's a way of organizing the experience that makes sense. You have all these experiences, and if you do this many, many times, you start to organize those experiences into some sort of big toe, right? Big theory of everything. That's what you do. And the way you organize that information has to do with the way you interpret it and what makes sense to you. It's part of your culture. It's part of your personal existence. And the chakras that came out of the Hindu religion are an organization of the data that they encountered and interpreted. So that doesn't mean they're wrong. You know, this is not a matter of right or wrong. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means that that's their tool set. And tool sets can be very effective. Don't get the idea that when you say, oh, that's just a metaphor and just a tool, that somehow that makes it less significant. You know, we need tools because of the way our minds are. We communicate with symbols and metaphors. So it's not like it's just a tool or it's just a metaphor. That's our understanding. That's the way we sort and organize the data. That's necessary. If we don't sort and organize the data, then we're always just kind of flopping around and can't put anything together. It's hard for us to kind of take a next step after the next step. And you'll see that next, this next slide. Okay, imagine a blind man, okay, completely blind from birth. He lives in Appalachia. He's kind of never been more than a couple of miles away from his cabin. And somebody throws a sack over his head, grabs him up, flies him to New York City, takes him to Times Square, pulls the sack off his head. Okay, now what does he do? What's his reality like? Okay, well, he goes out and, it's noisy, right? He hears all this noise, traffic, people, but there's no social services and nobody runs over to help him. Okay, he's on his own. And he goes up and he probably finds a building. Well, to him, that's a wall. And he keeps moving down along that, but this is bigger than any building he's ever seen before. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on, and it doesn't end. So right now, what's his vision of New York? It's a noisy, big wall. That's his interpretation. It's just a place with a lot of noise, and it's this big wall. And if he were to suddenly be transported back to Appalachia, that's what he'd tell people. He says, we all wondered whether cities really existed, but they do. They're just noisy, big walls. And then from that time on, everybody there would believe that that's what cities were. And if they went to one, that's how they'd interpret it probably. So you're like the blind man. When you go out of body or when you visit this larger realities, you're like the blind man in New York. What do you do? Well, there you are, and you have all this hubbub, and you're just standing in a spot. You take one step and see what's there. Then you take one step back to where you were so that you can integrate the two places, because now you're defining space, you're defining territory. Then you take another step and a step back, and then a step up to where you were before. So you do that sort of thing to just define, and then maybe you find a lamppost. All right, now that's a new part of your reality. And what is that lamppost? You don't know. It's just something that's vertical and it's hard. You maybe never encountered metal before, and you don't know what its function is, but now you integrate that. You keep this up until eventually you know how to get around. You understand New York City. You ride on a subway, you take a job, doing something, you get back and forth to your apartment. There are lots of blind people that live in New York City that function just fine, but they've had to learn what their reality was like in a different way. That's the way it is when you're out of body. You have an experience. You have to integrate that experience with the other experiences. You try to make a whole. You try to make a structure. How does this work? What's connected? Is this a wall, or is this just a whole bunch of buildings all next to each other? What are their functions? You have to put it together just like that blind man. You interpret. And that's where chakras and things come. People interpret, they experience, they got all this, and then they made patterns. They made sense of it, and they come up with these metaphors to explain their experience. So you get all sorts of different experiences. So what's the important things out of this? The important things are, don't try to duplicate anybody else's experience. Have your own experience, okay? Just because Bob Monroe rolled out a body, don't feel like you have to roll out a body. Just because others experience certain things, don't feel like you have to duplicate that. You can use their tools, if you will. You can use tools. You can use their metaphors, but don't be trapped by them. Your own metaphors and tools will be just, if not more effective for you, okay? So explore. Being skeptical is absolutely necessary. You must prove to yourself that what you are experiencing is real. So every opportunity you get, you must try to take data, find out things. You probably spend the first 2 or 3 years of your experience doing nothing more than proving things to yourself, going places, getting data, finding things, seeing what's going to happen next week, seeing what's going on in some other place with your remote viewing, just to get tools, not because those things are really interesting to you, but just because you need to use those tools and verify that they are working, that it's real, that it's outside of you. So I can't emphasize that enough. Step 1 is to experience and explore. And then as you experience and explore, experiment. Gather the data. You have to do it on your own. Reading about what Bob Monroe did or anybody else will not get you very far. Now, the point of this exploration is just to get a sense of the larger reality. This will be a growing experience for you, probably, but only if you look for the big picture. Don't look for the details. Read between the lines. Okay. Now, it's not only your influence when you get out there, but there's others that are influencing you when you're out there. Okay, let's talk a minute about guides. What are guides? Now, we all probably, well, I don't know, we all do, but some of us anyway have non-physical entities that we interact with that we call guides, and some of us, we've become real good friends with them. We know them well and have been interacting with them for years. Okay, but what are the guides? The guides are a metaphor. Okay. We imagine them to be a being like us, some sort of a being, and this being kind of keeps track of everything we're thinking and doing and what's about to happen, and it's like their job is just to kind of hover over us and keep track of everything we do, think, about to do, our intent, and they give us some information that's very useful sometimes. That's not really the way it is, but that's the way we imagine it, because that's the way we can describe it in terms of our own experience. Because it's another outside entity, because we're communicating with it, we make it into a person like ourselves. But now, wouldn't that be an awful job if all you had to do is hover over somebody all the time, 24/7, and keep track of what they were thinking and doing and why? That's a tough job. It'd probably be boring. But anyway, that's not exactly like that. There is the larger consciousness system that is trying to help us succeed. That system provides an interface to you here to help you make good decisions that will evolve your consciousness and lower your entropy. It's that interface to you is what you personalize as your guide. And that interface is personal. It is your interface. And it does have a sense of humor, and it does have personality. It's not just like you're talking to the computer. It is a entity, if you will. But that's the guides. And can everybody, does everybody have guides? No, everybody doesn't have guides. Some people share guides. It depends on how much help you can use. If you take those that are at the very beginning end of this process, there may be one guide, if you will. Again, we're saying guide is a metaphor. It's just a metaphor. There may be one guide for a dozen people because they just can't use that much help. They're not tuned in. They're not connected. Okay, so you don't necessarily have a guide, assigned to you when you're born or something. It's based on need. what your needs are, what you can use. And some people have 2 or 3 that they connect to or more. Okay? And it just depends. You get the help you need. If you don't need much help, if you're not at a point where you can get a lot of help, then there's no point. The interface is waiting until you're ready for that. Once you're ready, it shows up. If you need guiding from different perspectives, then you'll have the interface will interface with you from different perspectives, and then you call that, different individuals. So it's personal. It's up to you. If you have the need for it, you get it. Now, what are these guides going to do? These guides are there to help you evolve. They're not there to have conversation. They're not there to help you get better stock picks. They're not there to entertain your ego. That's why, for the most part, they don't communicate directly, in language. Now, as you grow more, you have a more direct communication with the larger system, and it does get that way. But when you're not quite ready for that yet, the communications are always kind of nonverbal. Okay, you kind of get it, and there's a communication going, but it's not real clear and verbal. And people complain to me all the time. They say, "Tom, my guides aren't talking to me." Well, it's because the guides don't want to interact with your intellect, because your intellect isn't where it's at for them. They're interested in change, growth inside your being, and they can talk to your intellect all day and it won't make any difference. They don't want to interact with you on an intellectual level because that's not useful to them. They avoid that. Now, if you have grown enough that interacting with you on an intellectual level is useful, and you do get growth, and you can grow that way, then you're likely to get an intellectual connection. Okay, so it's all determined on your needs and what you are ready for, what you're ready to make use of. And most people will sit there and they'll kind of hear that, and they'll think about themselves, and they'll say, "I'm ready." We all feel like we're ready. And then the next thing is, and I must be overlooked. There's something wrong with the system. Here I am ready, and it's not happening to me. I'm being overlooked. You're not being overlooked. The system will interact with you when you're ready to profit from the interaction. And your view of profiting from the interaction is probably different than their view of your profiting from the interaction. Your view may be an experience. Your view may be, wow, I want to go, do these things. And their view is, that's not going to be of any value. Now, also these guides or the system interface to you will give you ways to learn. Things will happen in your dreams and in this reality. There's a lot of nudging going on. You hear the word synchronicity. Things just happen to fall into place, and it's a little more than you'd expect just out of luck because it happens a whole lot. Well, there are a lot of things that are being nudged, a lot of things that are being presented to you, experiences. Often we have big, fundamental paranormal experiences, and then they just disappear. Like it happens once, and then it's gone. A lot of the times that is just an eye-opener. That's like the wake-up call. Hey, guess what? There's a larger reality. See this? Your passed away father comes and you have a conversation with him and you see him just as clear as anything, and the conversation is obviously not just you, because it's, you can tell this is another person. Or, a mother knows that their child's in trouble, some sort of distress, telepathically. These things happen to people. And sometimes it's just a vision. You just have a spontaneous out of body, and you go out of body and you wander around in your house or your apartment and you can see things, and you run into beings and other things, and then it's gone. This is just an eye-opener to let you know. And why do you get this eye-opener? Because the system has decided that you're ready. You're ready to know more. You're ready to grow. You're ready to take the next step. You're ready to start to understand about the larger reality. So you have a dream, you have an experience that kind of opens that door a crack, and it's supposed to encourage you to go find out more, to learn, to grow, to pursue it. So these things happen to a lot of people. If you just talk to people, you probably find that, at least half of them, if not more, have had some kind of experience like this. And then maybe you'll just have another one and another one. This is you being poked with a stick. They're telling you, there is a larger reality out there. Because the first couple, they were amazing on day one, but by day 5, you've kind of forgotten about them all. It's just, I must have had too much spicy food, and you put it off. So you get another poke with a stick if you're ready. If you're not ready, they poke you 3 or 4 times and you just keep putting it off, then they'll let it go. You're not ready yet. A lot of times you'll be tested as to your fear. If you're ready to experience out of body, you'll get an out of body experience. You'll have something happen to you, but it'll scare you half to death. They'll do something to frighten you. The proverbial 800-pound gorilla will show up and sneer at you or something. And if that scares you and you immediately, run back, then they know you're not ready. Because if you have fear, then you're going to find the hook in your hand, the wall. You're going to run into all this trouble. You're not ready yet. You shouldn't be there yet. So it's kind of self-policing. These guides will use kind of any means necessary. So because you have a belief system, let's say you are very, very religious. Let's perhaps say that you're Catholic and you're very religious, and they want to appear to you to open the door that you are, that reality is greater. They may appear as Mary, or Jesus, or Uncle Fred, or anyone that you might relate to. Because if they appeared as a talking donkey, you probably wouldn't pay any attention. If they appeared just as a voice out of the blue, you may not pay any attention. So guides will take whatever form necessary to get the message across that they want to get across. It's just they're trying to communicate to you. They're trying to help you grow up. And they'll do that in a way that you can understand. So they will try to use the metaphors and symbols that are familiar to you. That's why they're so personalized. Did you ever notice when people go out and they meet entities and they come back and they say, they ran into Uncle Fred. I keep picking on Uncle Fred. I don't have an Uncle Fred, but maybe somebody does in this room. But when you go out and you meet Uncle Fred's dressed in the same clothes that he always wore, 60 years ago when he died, he's still wearing that same suit. He's dressed like that because in your mind, that's the way Uncle Fred dresses. Okay, and it's in that same period of time, back from the 30s maybe, or whenever. It still has that same style, Aunt Sally's still wearing bell bottoms, right? And has her hair in two pigtails. We do that because that's familiar with us. And what happens when we run into people that we don't know? Oh, this is just an entity. Well, we don't know how to dress them, do we? We don't know where they came from. We put them in a robe. Robes are for all occasions, right? So we dress those people in robes. That's why so many of these beings wear robes, because we would be very uncomfortable talking to naked beings. So we have to dress them all because that's appropriate. Of course, they don't have bodies. You're not seeing any of that. You're making it up, and when you're interpreting it. And when you interpret it according to your own beliefs, your own experiences and so on. So that's why Uncle Fred's still wearing that same suit that you remember him in. I guess the bottom line is when you read this stuff and when you experience this stuff, don't take the literal interpretations too seriously. Find out what's really going on there. It's not about what the suit that Uncle Fred wore. That's not what makes it real. It's what did he say? What's the communication? What's the content? What did you get from that? What was the feeling? It's the same with a dream. It doesn't matter whether you're being chased by little green monsters or whatever. It's not the little green monsters that are important. It's what's the dynamics going on in it. What's happening? What are the feelings? What are you reacting to? A lot of those dreams are set up just to teach you lessons. A lot of them lessons are centered about fear. If you're fearful, they give you opportunities to rise above that fear. So, let's see. Higher self. Your higher self is just yourself. You are consciousness. You are a consciousness entity. I call it an individuated unit of consciousness, right? A separate piece of data and rules and information. And a part of that has now joined this multiplayer game. So here we are in this physical reality system, learning, growing, reducing our entropy, evolving. And then there's more of you than that, though. And that's what we call our higher self. Sometimes we say it's our oversoul. And we think of that as the place where all these experiences from all of our lives kind of get collected up into this oversoul. And that's the real us. Well, we're not separate from that. We tend to separate everything because that's the way our rule set is. Our rule set is a set that everything is separate. There's you, and then there's everything outside of you, which is all the other people and stuff. So we think of, well, here's me, and then there's my higher self, and there's my oversoul, and we make that all into separate entities, and then we can go visit our oversoul, visit our higher self, and have a conversation. It's all just us. Okay, it's all one consciousness, and we're all just a piece of the larger consciousness. So communicating to your higher self is just letting your consciousness interact with the larger data set that you are. It's a natural thing that you can do. Your larger self is not brilliant and knows all the secrets. It's not like you talk to your higher self and get secrets. Your higher self's just you. Your higher self is evolving because of the things you are doing here. You're a reflection of that higher self. You're a manifestation of that higher self in this reality. Okay, so we don't think of our higher self as like a demigod sitting up there with great experience and knowledge. Well, it has a different viewpoint than we do. It's not trapped in this viewpoint, but it's really just us. We're a projection or a sample or a representative of that higher self. It's us. It's all consciousness. Okay, negative beings. People talked about, well, what about the bad guys out there? I think I mentioned this yesterday. You can lower entropy. You take a system, an individual, and it can make choices. And those choices can reduce your entropy. As you reduce your entropy, you have more power and more effect. Now, the normal and the right way to do that is you grow toward love, the entropy reduces, and you become more evolved. But there is another way. You can make very self-centered choices. You can make choices that are not growing toward love, but they're very controlled. In other words, you can practice control of your mind, control of that energy. You can manipulate your intent. You can meditate and learn how to connect with your consciousness. And then you can control your intent so that you can focus it well. And you can do that with benevolent means in mind. You don't have to do that moving toward love. So you can lower your entropy in some small, limited way and develop negatively. But it's all through control. It's very limited. Your headroom is low. You can't get but so powerful. These negative entities, because they can appear to you in any way they want, look big and monstrous and their teeth are very long and all these other things, it's just to frighten you, okay? That's the scare factor. It's fear. They can manipulate you with your fear. If you have no fear, they have very little power to do anything. So it's a limited way of lowering your entropy. And now we have people that do that too. We have people that learn how to manipulate their intent so they can change those probabilities in the margins where there's uncertainty, and they can do that for their trying to make money, trying to hurt other people. It's the same sort of thing. Yes, that's there. There is a negative side that can do those kinds of things, but it's a very self-limiting side. You don't grow. You can just get so far. So there is a trap in the paranormal. People sometimes get into paranormal, and then their egos, they start feeling powerful and special. Oh, I can do this. I can see auras. I can do these kinds of things. And maybe they make money at it, and maybe that's honest enough. But maybe they use it for their advantage to manipulate other people and so on. So it can be done, but it's a very weak path. it's not a strong path. The reason it can affect you is because that negativity can connect to your fear. It will almost be impossible to affect you if you don't have fear. It has no way to connect to you. Okay. We have to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Okay, we kind of mentioned this. The more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. And again, when I say learn, I am not talking about in your intellect. I'm not talking about amassing facts and structures and theories. I'm talking about experience. The more you learn, the more you grow, the easier it is to learn more. That makes it an accelerating process. So it's painfully slow in the beginning. It's painfully slow. You want to, you've heard about it and you just want to go there, and you want to do it immediately. And most of us are very impatient. But it is an accelerating process. The more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. Things make more and more sense to you. And next year you can learn twice as much as you learned last year. And the year after that, you learn twice as much as you learned the previous year. It just keeps growing like that. That's the way it works. Okay, I think we've talked about these things. It's easy to confuse the various things you find out there, the various databases. Again, it's just experience, experimentation. Learn slowly. Don't expect it in a year or two or three, because I've been doing this like 38 years. And it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years ago that it all pulled together in my mind into one coherent, organized piece of information. And then I spent another couple of years doing experiments to see whether that was actually true or not. And then I sat down and I wrote these books. It takes a long time, or maybe I'm just slow, and I would admit to that. But don't expect to jump there in great bounds and leaps. Just slowly. The way you will recognize progress is usually looking back. If you sit here and you look back and say, well, what kind of person was I? Where was I 5 years ago? And just think about the person you were 5 years ago and the person you are now, and you will say, oh yeah, I've been growing up. I'm different now. I understand bigger pictures now. And that's the way you notice progress. It's not like one day you wake up and suddenly, you're almost Superman. You can fly through the sky or something. It doesn't happen that way. It's very, very, very gradual, and you don't notice it as it's happening. So don't get discouraged to say nothing's happening. You won't be aware that anything's happening until you look back at it 5 years later, and then you'll see there's a big difference. Okay. Learning at the intellectual level is almost entirely irrelevant. It really doesn't matter what you know in your intellect. The only thing your intellect's going to do from you is help give you direction. You can use that intellect to understand and say, okay, I think I need to take my experience in this direction. And here's how I'm going to approach that direction. That's what the intellect can do for you. After it's pointed you in the right direction and justified you're making a step that direction, basically the intellect is no longer that useful to you until you get to a point where you need to find another direction. So the intellect is good to, after you have enough data, to assess that data, say, is what I'm doing real? Do I need to do something else? You do have to make those assumptions. You do have to judge. You do have to do analysis. It's not that you get rid of that entirely. You just don't do it all the time as you go. Wait until you've put some serious time into something before you get to that point. But then do the analysis, do the judging, and make a decision, decide on a path, and step out on that path. You're not going to always get it right every time. This is a lifetime pursuit. It takes a lot of time to get there. The other thing is that these guides and this system is not going to help you do things that are counterproductive to your growth. Okay, so if you're going to do things that are counterproductive to your growth, the system's going to put a ceiling on what you can do. It won't necessarily stop you, but you may get denied access. You may have a ceiling put on where you're going to go with it. The system isn't there to help you de-evolve. So it's not going to do that. And if there's something that you're thinking about, so boy, I could do this and it would be great for me, but it would maybe bother other people. It's not going to happen. It's not just about you. It's about you and everybody that's connected with you and people connected to them. So the system looks at the system effect. If this change gets made, how does that affect the entropy of the system? Well, this guy, it lowers his entropy a little, but gee, it raises the entropy of these 6 people a lot. Well, then that guy's not going to have his entropy lowered because this total effect of the system is that the entropy is going to raise, not lower. So it's not just you, it's you and all the people you're connected with. So it has to be a system advantage before it's encouraged. So, there's one of these things that it might be better for you to do this one thing, but that may not be better for the learning of other people. And that's the same with, also it works the other way. There may be a person here who's in great misery and having a terrible time, and fixing that may not be the thing to do because there are 10 or 20 people around them learning from that person's suffering, learning from that experience. So that experience now is actually part of the growth. And it also gives that individual growth. So there's always opportunity for everybody to grow up. Nobody's ever in a sacrificial position. They sacrifice themselves for somebody else's growing. It's generally not like that. Everybody is generally in a position to learn something and grow. And after I say that, let me also say that everything that I tell you is not something that, it's not a rigid law. I'm not telling you about the laws of reality. I'm telling you about the way things usually are. One thing I have learned is that almost anything can happen. When somebody says, well, this and this happened to me and it's just really a strange story, I don't think, well, that's bizarre. That probably didn't happen. They're just imagining that. Almost anything can happen. But we're talking about what generally happens and how things generally work. Everybody's unique and different, and you'll have your own experience. So when I say nobody ever gets sacrificed and just does things for other people, well, that's probably not true. I'm just thinking that's generally not true. That would be the rare exception that somebody does that. Because even if you're in the suffering role, you have a lot of opportunity to grow. Suffering's a tough teacher, but it teaches you grace and humility and a lot of other things that are good. Okay. Now, what you experience generally is a reflection of yourself. Okay? And that's true whether it's in the larger reality or whether it's in this physical reality. The kind of reality we generate, our life, if your life sucks, it's probably because you have a lot to learn. It's not because all those people out there that are giving you a hard time are the enemy. So what you experience, the quality of the interaction that you experience is generally a reflection of the quality of the interaction that you have. So if people interact with you very positively and very lovingly, that's probably because you interact very positively and very lovingly. We tend to get, a reflection of ourselves in our interactions.